Okie dokie, should be recording. Hello everybody, my name's Cody Finley, and I'll be talking about defining personality and individual differences. So what is personality and individual difference? Well, to start with personality, the textbook defines personality as a relatively stable set of characteristics that influence an individual's behavior. So what does that really mean? Or at least what does that look like? Well, in terms of what we're studying, right, organizational behavior, we really want to look at people's behavior and how this is pretty much how your personality can affect your behavior. And so in order to understand people, you kind of need to understand a little bit about how people become who they are. So personality, it's an individual difference, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. But essentially what that means is that personality is unique to you. There's no two people that have the same personality. You can take whatever test you want to online or on Facebook or whatever that like your aunt posts, but that's not like, that's a very oversimplified view of personality, right? Like if you really want to get into it, personality can be broken down into so many different aspects. And when you really look at it that way, there's no two people that have the same personality. Fortunately, personality is consistent. It's not like a bipolar aspect of who we are. I mean, yes, it can change. Like your personality can be shaped and molded over time, and remolded and broken down and built up again. However, for the most part, it's pretty consistent. It's not easy just to like wake up one day and be like, I'm going to change my entire personality. So it's a consistent aspect of who we are. But really to understand personality, at least where it comes from, you have to look at two factors, which is heredity and environment. So heredity refers to genetics. There's certain personality traits that people have found that we kind of are born with. The textbook mentions a study about some twins who were separated at birth, right? And they developed similar personality traits. Things like extroversion or impulsiveness, like those kinds of things. They found to be genetic. I don't really know how they determine what is genetic or how they find that, but I guess, studies can reveal those things in people. So some of their personality, they found these twins, even though they had totally different lives from each other, they ended up being somewhat similar and even having similar jobs once they like graduated college or, started a career. Environmentally, like that's not talking about like, save the planet and stuff like that. Environment refers to the things around you, right? Like your family, your culture, your education, other things like that, they're not like born inside you, but they're just constructed from the world around you. We take some of our personality from those things. We learn how to be a certain way and kind of learn who we want to be. And ultimately our personality is decided by us, but it's really influenced by both our genetics and the environment that we're surrounded in. We're kind of products of how and where we live and what we learn and what we're taught. So yeah, that's a little bit about personality. There's like several different theories and other things about personality that we'll get to later on, but that's just a brief overview of it and where it comes from. All right, so let's talk about individual difference as well. Individual difference is defined by the textbook is the way in which skills, abilities, personalities, perceptions, attitudes, values, and ethics differ from one individual to another. Essentially, it's what makes you different from your neighbor, your roommate, your mom, your dad, like everybody else in the world. Your individual differences are what make you separate from them. You can share similarities with other people, but brick for brick or quality for quality, you are different from everybody else around you. And so relating this to what we're studying, organizational behavior, this presents a challenge for management because no two people are exactly alike. So how are you supposed to figure out how to work with everybody when everybody is different? It can be difficult. I don't know if you've been a leader in any of like, church or I don't know, school or even at your jobs. But it can be difficult to work with people when there are big differences in who everybody is. But really, good managers want to understand these differences. They want to be able, like, the better you understand these things, the easier it is to work with other people. And so the textbook talks about a few ways we can kind of figure out these things. They've discovered, or at least been able to interpret like individual differences by really looking at two different factors, which is personal and situational, which are pretty similar to in personality. There's the heredity and environment. Well, personal and situational factors are similar in a sense that the personal factors consist of like those individual differences, like personality, perception, your attitude, et cetera, et cetera. And the situation consists of your environment. It's how you grow up. It's your workforce, like not workforce, but your work group, like the teams you're part of, like your personal life, the job that you have. Those are things that can influence like individual differences. They affect you. There was a guy named Lewin who, like, it was way back when this stuff was kind of being studied. He summarized, like, trying to understand individual differences in this formula. B equals a function of P and E. B is behavior, P is person, E is environment. And so, really what he wanted to do is try to figure out just like a simple way of understanding these individual differences. And so essentially, he breaks down this formula and he explains it in 4 different steps. His first step is behavior is a function of a continuous, multi-directional interaction between the person and the situation. So, when I read this, I think of, like, in the gospel, we learn that we're agents to act, not objects to be acted upon. And so the situation and the person, like us and the lives that we have, we're acting on each other, not like our lives and the situations we're in aren't just like making us something, but we end up making something of the world around us too. Like we have a say in who we become, right? Step 2 is the person is active in this process and both changes and is changed by situations. It's pretty similar to what I said before. But we change the world around us and the world changes us. 3 is people vary in many characteristics, including cognitive, affective, motivational, and ability factors. You have to if you want to understand like people's behavior, you got to understand that people are different. And they don't think the same way as other people. They don't act the same way as other people. They don't feel the same way as other people. They're not motivated the same way. And so there are differences in who we are, like in like every sense of the word. Number 4 was that 2 interpretations of situations are important: the objective situation and the person's subjective view of the situation. And so, like we talked about with personal and situational factors influencing us, when you want to look at like a situation, someone's behavior, you got to look at the person as themselves and like who they are with their individual differences and personality and whatnot. And you got to look at the environment that's shaping that person. You can't just look at one. Like some people will say like, oh, that person had a really bad upbringing, so gotta give them a slack. And some people say like, oh, well, that person's just like a really bad person, so we got to get them out of here. But you got to look at like all of the things that make us who we are and influence our behavior. That's really what it's saying. And to kind of wrap up this section, there's a little thing about skills and abilities. This thing GMA, which is your general mental ability. So essentially, it's just a way for people like really like in the workforce to try to find the best employee, right? We know that we have different skills and abilities that lead to different outcomes. Not everybody's going to be able to accomplish the same things. So they thought this guy Spearman was like, well, we can kind of take this this general mental ability, this GMA, and use that as a predictor of work performance across various occupations. And so for a long time that was like a key indicator for people. It's like, what's your GMA? If you have high GMA, then it seems like you're going to be like a good option for a job. However, as time goes on, people are like, well, is that really like the only way that you can like test people, see if they'd be a good worker, because there's a lot of things that like maybe you can't figure out. Or like maybe people just test bad on like when you're trying to find their GMA, and so it's not as I guess it's not as popular anymore, but they just, you know, there's different ways to find good employees, right? And so no matter how much you study and think about things, you just got to understand that people are different. And so you got to look at those differences and understand them. The better you understand it, and the easier it is to choose the best, or like to see the best in people and to work with them effectively. So uh, that is the presentation. Stop sharing that. Stop recording. Thanks.